Shalom, brothers and sisters in Christ. Let's dive into the Word. In today's Gospel, we see that the disciples were filled with grief at what Jesus had just told them. And St. Jerome tells us that they were overwhelmed with grief, not because they lacked faith, but out of love for their Master, and they could not bear to hear of any hurt or indignity towards him. And so we see that these disciples, they were filled with grief, not because they lacked faith, but because they loved Jesus. And my brothers and sisters, I think we can recognize this in our own life, where we were filled with fear, we were filled with grief, with sorrow, but our faith was still very strong. And so we were filled with this sadness, with this grief, because we loved the person who was suffering. We loved the person who was going through something very challenging in their life at that point of time. A lot of times when we think of these negative emotions of fear, of pain, of sadness, we would relate them with not having enough faith, with not praying enough, with things that are not associated with faith. But today we learn that even the disciples were filled with grief when their faith was so strong, when their faith was solid. And this shows that it is normal, it is human to be able to feel these emotions. It is out of love that we can feel these emotions for another person. Even in these times, we are not discounting the power of God in our life, but we know that this person is going through something very painful at that point of time. And when we are trying to move forward in these times, it can be very difficult. It can feel like we are being weighed down by the current situation. And one of the ways that we can move forward is by anticipating the graces that are to come, by looking back on graces that we have already received, by remembering what the Lord has done for us in our life, the ways that He has worked in our life. It may be in situations that were very easy for us, or it may be even in situations that were really challenging for us. And this can help us continue in times of uncertainty. In these times that we are in Malaysia, we can recognize that our health system is not at the best. Our political system is also being challenged. And it can be very easy for us to think that things are not going to work out. Maybe we are filled like the disciples with grief. We are filled with sadness, but not because we lack faith, but because we love the people who are suffering, but because we love the country that we live in. And so by anticipating the graces that we have already received in the past, we can move forward with faith, knowing that God already has the best plan for us in store, knowing that He already has His will written out and ready to be given to us. And by acknowledging the graces that we have already received, we do not just cling on to them, we do not hold on to them waiting for that same graces to flow again. But what we will do is we will give them back to God. We will place them in the hands of the Maker, because we only remember them to help us move forward. But at this time, God has new graces, renewed graces for us to receive, to be able to go through this time of grief, to be able to encounter Christ once again in these times of uncertainty. And in the next part of the Gospel, we see that Jesus paid taxes at Capernaum. And St. Jerome tells us again that Jesus paid our taxes too. He paid our tax, not at Capernaum, but on the cross. And because we are children of God, we are recognized as sons and daughters of God, we are exempted from paying these taxes. We are immune from paying these taxes, as St. Jerome tells us. But all that Christ asks of us is that to continue to love Him and to serve Him with all our hearts and with all our souls, because we are sons and daughters of God. And we are asked to move forward with faith in that direction. Today, the Church also celebrates the feast of Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, or Edith Stein. And one of the things that really stands out in her life in the life of Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross is that how she emphasizes that God is at work even when we don't understand it. Today, you and I in Malaysia, we are in this time of, as we mentioned, of a great uncertainty, especially in the health and political system. We see that many people are suffering from these times, and it can be very hard for us to understand where God is at this moment or how He is working. But as the Gospel today tells us, as Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross assures us, God is still working in this time. Even in the midst of our grief and of our sadness, God is already there, and we feel this because we love the people around us that we are journeying with, that we know. My brothers and sisters, we just want to encourage you to continue in this journey of love, to continue to love the people around us and to be present to them, and to allow God to work with us, in us, and through us, so that His love that we receive will be shared with everyone that we meet. My brothers and sisters, God bless.